there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now, with the June coming to an end, we are almost through of all of our top ranking videos, and what's left to do is to basically make a top 10 7-star champion list and then the tier list update. Now, this is a fair warning. This isn't going to be a top 10 7-star champions per se, because there are a lot of 7-star champions that would be amazing, but realistically just are not plausible to achieve for vast majority of the player base due to the necessity for awakening and high sig and stuff like that. So this list actually is going to be more like top 10 7-star champions to pull fresh out of the gate. Because obviously, for example, when you pull 7-star Korg, you're not going to find much use to Korg unless you didn't have a ranked up 6-star Korg at all. But if you do have like a rank 3 high sig Korg or definitely a rank 4 Korg, now that 7-star Korg is going to sit on a shelf for quite a long time until you can awaken him and potentially start giving him 6 stones. And the same goes for quite a few champions where awakening ability is very important, and then if you do have the 6-star counterparts, then they are just going to be the more effective ones. So yes, this list is going to be much more focused on 7-star champions specifically that are great out of the box, or in other words, unawakened, because I do believe that is vast majority of the 7-star champions currently in the game, and we haven't seen a single 7-star awakening gem, single 7-star signature stone, single kind of like selector or nexus crystal for 7 stars, and well, duped 7 stars is not something that exists on vast majority of the accounts in the game. And if there are duped 7 stars, then it will be, in significant minority. That said, as all of the other lists, this is going to be a mixture of my own personal thoughts and opinions of these champions, together with current game relevance and trends. I primarily look at stuff like Alliance Wars, stuff like Battlegrounds, and also generally at questing situations. And again, based on which one you place heavier emphasis on, these lists will be different, and that is perfectly fine. We all do not have to see everything through the same lens because we have our own personal preferences on champion playstyles, masteries, again, in-game focus, and all of that stuff is super important to remember when leaving comments on the videos because, it's not one solution fits all, it's not one champion will appease everybody. That said, let's get into it, and this time around, I will be using this Aunt May prestige list here with the smaller champion icons because, well, I can filter out all the 7-star champions. Currently in game, we have exactly 38 7-star champions, 36 of whom are in the basic crystal, 2 of whom are not, therefore they will be disqualified from these rankings, as that's Danny Moonstar and Lady Deathstrike. Only way for anybody to get these is basically wailing out on Paragons, and again, I do think that's vast minority of people who have access to a 7-star of either one of these champions. That said, let's jump to spot number 10, and spot number 10 is actually the very lowest prestige champion that we have, and that's Venom. I do think that Venom's awakened ability is quite nice, but if you check out that increased potency that he gets, or the additional buff, it's not that high. Like, if you compare all of the other increased potency abilities in game signature level, they're at least typically 50%. Like for Silver Surfer, increased potency of Furies by 50%. Like Spellsuit Spider-Man by 50%. By for Spider-Man Supreme, that's also like 50%. So this is like one of the older increased buff potency signature abilities, and it kind of shows because it's underpowered compared to, rest of the newer champions when it comes to increasing the potency. But it's kind of a good thing when it comes specifically to 7-star Venom, meaning that everything that makes Venom good is in his base kit. His, access to bleed, access to armor breaks, access to true strike when opponent is below 18% health, access to nullify on his level 1s and regen, access to his fury buffs, immunity to power burn and drain against tech champions. All of that stuff is in his base kit, and the only difference is that he will kind of ramp up slightly slower. But the cool thing is that with stat focus, you can increase his crit rate, which is quite low, and he really does benefit from it, meaning that you can basically skip one of these in crit rate increase buffs because you can get, It's solid increase from stat focus, and that will allow you to crit more and therefore finish the fights quicker as is. And then obviously the increase in health, challenger rating, attacker rating, everything else is going to be super helpful for Venom to perform. So if you are somebody who has pulled 7-star Venom, you should be very happy because he's perfectly fine, functional, and still incredibly capable champion. And yeah, I will put him in spot number 10. Spot number 9, I'll go to skill class and we're going to give it to Falcon. Because Falcon's Awaken ability is quite nice. It is better than people think. And if you can get your Falcon Sig 20, then that will be a massive boost. But even without him being awakened, again, largely due to stat focus and increased base stats, you still get a champion that functions very, very well, especially against science champions. Because then he still gets an increase in his lock-on duration as well as it lasts 40% longer against science champions specifically, which are the main kind of like targets for what you will use Falcon. And Falcon's one of those champions that's kind of like a sleeper hit in Balgons often, and I think he will be even better now with the decrease of the importance in the fight time. So that will definitely let him outcompete several champions, like potentially Hitmonkey or some others that, did the fight slightly faster, but potentially did slightly less fights, because that is always one of the coolest things about Falcon, where his RNG reduction is 100% super reliable, accessible from the get-go, great thing counter, and against, plenty of other champions. Just sometimes he did not quite have the damage or the speed. With the change to the Battleground scoring system, that weakness is significantly kind of mitigated. And on top of it all, obviously still extremely capable for Alliance War, especially if you can boost him up, give him some skill power boost. When he does have his guaranteed crits on level 2, he interacts with that very well. And yeah, I do think that a 7-star Falcon is incredibly, incredibly solid pull for virtually every aspect of the game. Moving forward, spot number 8, I am currently going to give it to Sunspot, and you could kind of make an argument that you could probably push this even higher, because there are definitely quite a lot of, Sunspot appreciators. I definitely would personally be very, very happy to pull Sunspot. So what Sunspot synergy ability does, well, it gives him more solar charges, thus giving him ability to basically do longer fights with more damage output. But him being a 7-star, and having increased base stats, increased crit rating, pretty much everything else, kind of makes that Sig ability, lack of Sig ability, easier to overcome, because he's going to be doing more damage as is. And I know for a fact that staring down the 7-star Sunspot in Battlegrounds is very scary when opponents are using it, so I'm definitely jealous of virtually everybody. Another cool thing is that Sunspot is going to be an absolute prestige king at current rank levels available for 7-stars. So if you can get 26 on the guy, you will love the prestige that you get once you take him to rank 2. Another reason why I absolutely want to get this champion specifically, and hopefully dupe him in the near future. And all that put aside, Sunspot's kind of unique in the sense that his synergies get more potent based on his Sig level, but the importance of synergies in the game has decreased drastically. When it comes to Sunspot himself and his abilities, he effectively is a mutant nuke. There are little bits of utility that aren't like too, widespread. He's immune to Incinerate. He has access to a ton of Incinerate debuffs. Increased amount of power that he gains lets him throw more special attacks than normal. And he has perfect block whilst opponents are incinerated. That's about it. And then access to prowess. But the damage is that really makes the champion and makes him viable for a ton of situations. Spot number 7, I will give to Gore, because Gore's Sig ability, again, is helpful in very specific scenarios. And it's kind of like with Galen in a sense, where you will either not notice the absence of Sig ability at all in like majority of the fights, or when need be, it is kind of a big deal. Like when you do need to go up against champions that frequently auto-block, having that undermine is super helpful. Recently witnessed this in Act 8.3 beta as well, where duped Gore was amazing. Unduped Gore, take it or leave it type situation. But Gore luckily does have mechanics in his own kit that kind of let him bypass those auto-block mechanics, at least in some instances, due to his reliance on special 3s and access to like couple of special threes in quick succession. Other than that, Gore is a champion that definitely, has initially been somewhat underlooked, then received a tune-up, and now is significantly better than a lot of people still kind of give him credit for. And the beauty in his kit is it's very, very straightforward. You just want to get a bunch of buffs on yourself, you inflict a ton of debuffs to your opponent, and that is his thing, basically. Massive, massive explosive level 3s, a ton of debuffs and damage over time effects, and a ton of buffs. There are plenty of situations where obviously he will not be your go-to champion, but there's quite a lot of stuff that he can do and where he will, work with the nodes, especially with some of the more recent nodes that require you to, inflict specific number of debuffs to the opponent or having access to shock or bleed or poison or degen or something like that. And Gore does that extremely, extremely well. And if you do pull a 7-star Gore, by no means be upset. Moving on to spot number 6. Spot number 6, I am going to go to Titania. And Titania undoubtedly is a champion kind of similar to, let's say, Falcon, in a sense, where if you do have a rank 4 high sig Falcon and a 7-star unduped Falcon, you probably will want to run the rank 4. But if you do not have the champion rank, 7-star Titania still puts in a ton of work. Her sig ability can help her quite a bit in specific matchups, but increased stats do that as well. Not to mention that 7-star Titania is a better defender than a 6-star high sig Titania as well, due to the increased health pool and attack. Other than that, Titania in general has been shining more and more throughout the game due to her access to stagger, due to her immunity to buffs. One would make an argument that she's, top 2 buff immune champion in the game currently, for sure. And that definitely is noticeable. And then obviously her party piece on level 3 and debuff duration and ability to inflict all the debuffs to the opponent definitely has made Titania kind of like a staple at the highest levels of the game, be that Alliance War, be that questing. 8.2 had a ton of parts where Titania just completely cheesed all of them, and there are some ridiculous interactions there. And then obviously Battlegrounds as well. What is one of the cooler things in matchups, and here's going to be a little hint, Titania can actually do the Shrug of Champions and Shrug of Nodes very well, which is quite unique for Science Champions, which gives her an extra kind of like avenue of usefulness, if you will. Because Titania's abilities are largely based on you inflicting the debuffs, not making them stick. So that whenever an opponent is inflicted with debuff Titania against a Fury, it does not matter if opponents shrug them off immediately. So you can use Titania against Kingpin, you can use Titania against Mallman, you can use Titania against vast majority of debuff shruggers and nodes that would, tenacity and whatnot. Because she doesn't care whether those debuffs stick. Yeah, of course, it's a good thing if they do, reducing opponent's combat power rate or, inflicting weakness or what have you. But the main thing, obviously, is the Furies. And as long as you are able to inflict debuffs at all, as long as the opponent is not completely debuff immune, she will work. So keep that in mind. And if you do have Sensei Titania, be very, very, very happy. All right, let's move on to spot number 5. And spot number 5, I'm going to give it to Dragonman. Because Dragonman has always been like one of those Mystic champions that's considered to be very, very solid. Not necessarily the top champion. For quite a long time, he was actually living towards the bottom end of top 10 Mystic class or middle pack, but obviously we have had some exciting Mystic champions arrive. Release of this guy's 7-star has improved his stock drastically, because all of a sudden 7-star Dragonman that has stats basically of close to a rank 5 champion turns out to be a very dangerous opponent in Alliance War where you can get your head kicked in. Very dangerous defender in Battlegrounds, and also very, very powerful attacker. And the cool thing is that his sig ability doesn't really matter all that much, because even if you get him at max sig, it's kind of nice. You reduce opponent's regeneration slightly, or you reduce their ability power rate slightly, or you slightly reduce their armor rating, or something like that. But in most of the cases, the sig ability doesn't really come into play majority of the time. And then the rest of his kit is just thick and filled with cool things. Like you have access to Furies, you have access to Incinerates, you have access to unblockable buffs, you have access to burst of damage in the corner, you have access to burst of damage with a heavy attack, you have slow, you have ineptitude that lowers opponents' buffs and stuff like that. And you obviously still have the full benefits of him being a robot and weaknesses, but yes, he's immune to bleed, poison, and armor shatter. If he ever gets armor broken, he inflicts damage on an opponent, and that significant power gain as well. So 7-star Dragon Man is one of my more wanted 7-star pulls as well, for sure. Right. Press the wrong button there, but back we are. Right, so number 4. And then we're going to go back to the mutant class, and I would give that to Bishop. Because Bishop is pretty much perfect out of the box. Especially for battlegrounds and most of the Lines 4 stuff. His sig ability is largely tuned around questing stuff. And it's not like make it or break it. There are some nice benefits, but you can definitely do without them, and Bishop's still going to perform perfectly fine. And then the cool thing about Bishop is that he has in his base kit a lot of stuff that many champions basically get in their sig ability. Like, for instance, punishing champions for shrugging off his debuffs. You know, Jubilee, that's entire Jubilee's sig ability. Bishop does it for free. Also, the whole passive stun thing against skilled champions, super effective, making him one of the best counters for a ton of tricky skill defenders like Kingpins and Korgs and whatnot. He has access to regen, obviously plenty of damage, massive energy resistance, and plenty of defensive and offensive capabilities, to the point where Bishop has soared towards the higher end of mutant class period, and the fact that he is one of the champions that does not need awakened ability makes him by far one of the most desired pulls in the game, in my opinion, from 7-star Crystal. My second most wanted 7-star, I would say, at the moment is Bishop. For number 3, I am going to give it to America Chavez. And America Chavez was one of those instances where initially I kind of underestimated her unawakened. As in, I knew her tune-up was good. I had started messing around with my 6-star rank 3 somewhat more, and I read the sig ability. It is very good. It does make her a lot better. Then I pulled my 7-star America Chavez, and I realized that she's crazy good even unawakened, and she has been kicking ass pretty much ever since. Due to her tune-up, she gains massive attack rating for each dimensional, dimension that she opens. Gives her 3,600 attack rating at rank. Let's go for rank 2. So it gives her 2,000 attack rating for each dimension. It's very easy to get 3 of these very quickly. Combined with her base attack rating, 5k, goes up to like 11k attack rating. That's if opponents do not have any buffs. Then obviously she has incredible ability to mitigate opponents' power gain. And on top of it, she has access to regen. And on top of it, she's a Mystic champion that can benefit from Mystic Dispersion. And then she increases her damage even further if opponents do happen to have buffs. And then her entire level 1 kind of play cycle lets her spam special attacks like nobody's business. And then obviously she has tons of defensive utility. She's so good that there is a very high likelihood that she will be my first 7-star that I take to rank 2, even if she's unawakened. And it's quite surprising. 2 months ago, I would have never said that. Now that I have had played with her, and I think I have total about 18 7-stars, she's just absolutely incredible. There's no question about it. And if you do have America Chavez unduped, it's a cause for celebration. If you have America Chavez duped, you should be dancing in the rooftops. Because that's one of the best things that you could have access to early on in terms of 7-stars. But number 2, my most wanted 7-star pull at the moment, champion that I really like, love, and if I can't get her very soon, I'll be taking up my 6-star to rank 4. And that's Shuri. Her awakened ability is nice. Special attack Shuri can block unblockable attacks, and against special attacks Shuri can block unblockable attacks. Definitely useful. And has up to 5% perfect block chance for each of her personal armor or passives. Can make her very sturdy champion. That is a useful ability, but you know, in most of the fights, you will not notice not having it. And then Shuri since she got released, and if you guys look at the early videos that I made about Shuri, I always said that she looks very unique. She looks very interesting. There is a ton of super quirky utility, but I was always worried about her damage output. Well, after her tune-up, her damage output is fine. It's definitely not record-breaking, but it's far from being a slouch. And in any kind of like mid to longer fights, her damage output is very good. It's solid in shorter fights. And now Shuri is legitimately one of the best 7-stars in the game and one of the best tech champions in the game, I believe. Because going through her kit, her ability accuracy cannot be altered, meaning she will ignore concussions, disorients, she will absolutely nuke down domino, and so on and so forth. Grants her immunity to shock and precision effects that are not her own. And this is like super important as well, because if she does not trigger the precision from dexterity mastery, means that she effectively is buff immune unless there is a node that places buffs on you, which means that you will never trigger a buff in a generic fight against Mystic champions. For it. In a generic fight, you will never trigger buffet node or power snack and so on and so forth. And that is like a massive deal. In many ways, it is better than having a full-on buff immunity if you can ignore precision and if you can, if you don't have any other buffs in your kit. Obviously, there will be times when buff immunity is better, but there will be times when this effect is, this ability overall works better because you can still benefit from a ton of nodes. You can still benefit from, free fights from Odin or some other nodes that give you Fury buffs or something like that. But then in generic situations, you will not be getting those buffs when you're using her, trying to avoid that. Also, Shuri cannot land critical hits without her personal precisions. Perfect. You can bypass another heap ton of abilities that were triggered on crits. But the cool thing with Shuri is that with her level 1, you can have all hits be guaranteed and pretty much spend the entire fight just having guaranteed crits with a very, very solid crit damage rating, by the way, need I add. So her damage, even just on crits, is not bad. And then obviously the fact that all of her attacks are non-contact and deal energy damage makes her better on defense because she's impossible to parry, but makes her better on attack as well, completely bypassing, Atuma and Killmonger, and you don't really want to use her against Killmonger, but still, a whole bunch of nodes and abilities that you can bypass due to the fact that you never make contact with opponent. And yeah, and then obviously her main damage dealing method is shocks and passive shocks. Tons of damage over there. She has access to untouchable, so she can phase through stuff as well. And yeah, that's about it. The new kit, the buff, the changes made her a very, very good champion. And she's by far my personally most wanted 7-star pull right now. And the 7-star champion that I at the moment value the highest because he is shining in virtually every single game mode is Hulk. Now, it's easy to look at Hulk just like as a nuke type of champion. And he is, but he isn't. And this is something that we have kind of known for a long time, but a lot of people often tend to forget it as soon as it's out of your mind. Because, Ronin cheese, we all know, as soon as you can do a Ronin cheese, you go and do it. Why? Because it's a super simple fight where you just basically stun lock opponent and KO them. And whilst Hulk's stun lock is not infinite, combined with the crazy amount of damage output, it might as well be for majority of the fights. Because after you do your initial setup and enter Gamma, and drop a level 1, the 9 fights out of 10 are finished there. Even if opponent's still at like 80% health and you drop your level 1, that often means that the last 80% of the health, you will just hit a stunned champion. Now, his awakened ability can be kind of nice, but is not really that important, especially because of the wording. So when Hulk enters Gamma Rage or he strikes the opponent with a heavy attack while it's active, he gains an unstoppable passive for 1 to 5.5 seconds. Can be useful occasionally, without a doubt, but it's not like a massive loss. Also, you're gaining physical and critical resistance while unstoppable based on missing health. It's really not as powerful as it sounds because the benefits that you gain whilst at high health are not high. So you'd have to be at low health already for these to matter, and you need to be unstoppable, which you're not in most cases. So, you can easily do without that ability. And then obviously has access to a ton of debuffs, a ton of physical burst damage, to infinite stun, and ton of damage period. Obviously, being like poison immune, it's quite cool. Not having any actual buffs on his kit is quite nice as well. So yeah, when it comes to Hulk, he is realistically on up and up. He's being used for a ton of questing. He was an amazing for a whole bunch of things in 8.3 beta, for instance. I'm sure that if I'd go back, I could do a ton of things with him in 8.2. And he's great for Alliance War because, again, you can completely shut down a ton of nodes and champions and fights. And there is no better indication in the fact that virtually everybody's running their 6 or 7-star Hulks in Battlegrounds now as well, due to the fact that he, deals with a ton of champions and does it very, very well. So, at the moment, I will put Hulk up top. Yeah, and that is what I would call the best 7-star champions to pull in the game right now. Again, heavy emphasis on the idea that these are the champions that function either perfectly or close to perfect, unawakened, and are of very high quality. There are other champions, obviously. Let's say Rocket Raccoon is a very solid pull. He functions great as a nuke champion unawakened. Ultimately, I value these champions more for their kits. And then there are champions that could make this list quite easily. For instance, Overseer. But Overseer, you really do want to get duped in vast majority of situations. Like, same as... One second. Same as, Terax. Cool champion, good defender. You really want to get him duped. Mysterio, same, and so on and so forth. But yeah, this is my personal list. Obviously, with 7 stars, it's also quite close by because most of the 7 stars specifically were grabbed from kind of like middle of the pack champions, kind of like good champions but not OP champions. So unlike in general situation in game where we have clearly very good champions, clearly very bad champions, and some champions in the middle, it is a lot harder to evaluate them as because most of them would be relatively close by in a general champion stat. Anyways, this is what I think. Let me know what you think, and I will catch you guys soon. Bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about